Once you've written an outline, you can look it over, make sure that it makes sense, see if there's anything you need to add, or see if there's anything that you actually don't want to write about after all. And once you play with the outline and feel good about it, then the writing should be relatively easy. I've put a document in for you to type in. I formatted MLA style, although if you want to go crazy and change it to APA, that'll work. But go ahead and type in there. And I'd suggest that you skip your intro for now, just so you can leave a little space for a little reminder that you need it eventually. And just write your body. Now the body I'd expect to be 2 paragraphs, although you might think of it rather as being 2 sections, one about the book, one about the real world connection. And then of course remember that we'll add a conclusion at the end once we figured out exactly what it is we want to say. There are 2 things I want to talk about here with just drafting this rough draft. First of all, you want to think of yourself as making a logical argument or leading your reader logically through some ideas here. And each paragraph should have a purpose. You should have something that you're trying to prove or something that you're trying to show with that paragraph. If you want to make sure that what you're writing makes sense and it's not jumbled and crazy, it's useful to have good, strong, clear sentences at the beginning that let both you and the reader know the point you're making. And then, of course, connections between those sentences. A good test to make sure that your ideas are holding together is to just look at the first sentence of the paragraph or the first and last sentence. In this case, I think if I read the first sentence of my paragraph here, you're going to see that I've got what I hope is a coherent argument. So in the beginning of the novel, Winston Smith, like most members of the outer party, is disconnected from other people. Then I'm going to show the disconnect. It's only when Winston develops a relationship with Julia that his mental and physical health improves. Okay, so first he's disconnected, develops a relationship, he improves. And I'm going to talk about that. Then, and I haven't quite finished it here, but here's my transition. In 1948, when Orwell was finishing his book, common sense may have told people that social connections mattered, but there was nothing like the amount of research available today that tells us just how important strong connections are to physical and mental well-being. And I'll explain that. So for each of my paragraphs, I have a purpose. There's a thing I need to show with the text. Down here, there's something I need to show with my research. But I think my reader's not going to get lost in what I'm saying. So again, a good test is think, what's my purpose for this paragraph? Have I clearly expressed that? And putting that nice strong claim or topic sentence right at the beginning of each paragraph is very helpful. The second thing I want to talk about here with drafting, as always, is quotations. You don't have to use quotations when you write, but I would like you to include one because again, it's a skill that's worth having, since when they're used skillfully, they can improve your writing. Let's talk about a couple things to do and not to do. Let's say that this is the quotation I want to use. He had never loved him so deeply as at this moment, not merely because he had stopped the pain. The old feeling that at bottom it did not matter whether O'Brien was a friend or an enemy had come back. O'Brien was a person who could be talked to. Perhaps one did not want to be loved so much as to be understood. If I just throw this into my writing, my reader's not going to know where it's coming from, and they're not going to know what the point of the quote is. Another issue is that there's kind of a lot going on in this quote, and really I don't need it all. So if I think through, probably the part that matters most here is right here, and I can trim the rest, put it in my own words. And I need to make sure that when I use this, again, I've given enough of a lead-in and enough of an explanation that my writer knows what to do with that quote, how to interpret it. In particular, when you're taking a quote from a text, you need to remind your reader of who's saying it and where it's coming in the story. So you're not asking your reader to remember out of this enormous book where this particular line came from. When I think about using this quotation effectively, it might be useful to remember that quote sandwich that we talked about earlier in the year, right? We've got that lead-in, that top piece of bread. We let the reader know where this quote is coming from. We've got the quote itself, that's the meat, and then we've got the explanation, that's the bottom piece of bread. So here's how this might look in context. Perhaps the example that most clearly shows people's need for connection is the emotion feels for O'Brien during his first torture session with him. Love. Winston loves O'Brien not just for stopping the pain, which O'Brien caused in the first place, but because he senses that the man is a person who can be talked to. Winston's longing for intelligent conversation with another human being is so strong it overcomes what ought to be revulsion for a lunatic who has deceived him and tortured him. So my lead-in lets you know where the quote's coming from. I've used only as much of that quote as I need to make my point. I did actually use brackets to alter it just for the verb tense, but the less you alter the quote, the better. And then I've got how I want to interpret that quote. And of course, this would fit within the larger context of me pointing out that, again, in this case, the need for connection is strong enough you're even trying to connect with the person who's torturing you. As far as embedding the quotation, making that quote work within our sentence so it doesn't feel slapped in, we've got a couple of methods for doing that. So here I've got the same quote. We bring him over to our side, not in appearance, but genuinely, heart and soul. And so again, I'm just focusing on the sentence where the quote is the embedding. One option is to lead in with some variation of so-and-so says. O'Brien tells Winston. O'Brien says, I'll have the comma, quote, capital letter, because it's like a sentence within a sentence. And of course, for the citation, the period will go outside there, making sure that we know that that citation belongs to that sentence. Now I could also lead in with a full sentence and use a colon. And remember, the colon says, there's more, and here's what it is, and here's what shows that. And I'll have that capital letter, and then again the citation there. So although Winston believed he could keep his inner self safe from the party, O'Brien explains that the inner self is exactly what the party plans to take. And here's what he said. We bring the heretic over to our side, not in appearance, but genuinely, heart and soul. And there I've used brackets to clarify who the him is. Now our other option, of course, is that flow quote option where we just take a little snippet of the quote and blend it with our sentence, and there's no punctuation because there's no pause, and a lowercase letter because, again, it's not a sentence within a sentence, but it's one with our sentence. During their first torture session together, O'Brien explains that the party converts heretics not in appearance, but genuinely, heart and soul. And the nice thing about a flow quote is you can start the quote where you want it and save yourself the trouble of using brackets. As you write, make sure you've got a purpose for each paragraph, something clear that you're showing to your reader or proving to your reader. And then I do want to see one quote worked nice and smoothly in there. Not a lot. Again, if you've more than 10% of what you have is quoted, that's way too much. 10% is the limit. But again, one is what I'd like to see where you've got these nice skills. So set a timer for 25 minutes, write your body, and you're good to go.